Hello and a very warm welcome to this edition of the KulturCafé. No doubt, this has been a difficult year for culture. Beethoven fans worldwide must feel particularly disappointed because so many events dedicated to the 250th birthday of Ludwig van Beethoven had to be cancelled or postponed. But there is hope that the COVID-19 situation will improve over the next few months. There's also comfort in the form of beautiful new recordings of the music of Beethoven. One man who has made a major contribution in this regard is Austrian pianist Ґоттліб Валліш, who is our guest today. Mr. Wallíš, good evening and very welcome to the KulturCafé.
Hello, good evening from Berlin. I'm very pleased to be part of KulturCafé this week.
Mr. Wallíš, before we talk about Beethoven and your recording project, I would like to give the audience the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you. You hail from a Viennese family of musicians. Your grand-uncle was Austrian composer Johann Nepomuk David, and you yourself started actually your musical journey very, very early. How old were you when you started playing the piano?
If I remember correctly, I was 5 years old, I think. I started with my mother. She's a harpist and a piano teacher, and she gave me the first piano lessons, and I think she quickly saw progress in my piano playing, and then she was the one who introduced me to my teacher, who was going to become one of my major influences, a wonderful lady from Vienna, Elisabeth Dvorak-Weishaupt, who was a professor at the Vienna Academy of Music at the time, and was leading the class for gifted children. So I played for her, and at the age of 6.5, I entered the university. I passed an exam, and after this test, I became one of the youngest students in Vienna, piano students at the University Academy at the time it was called.
Right. So obviously your talent was identified very, very early, and you made also big progress, because I read somewhere that at the tender age of 12, you gave your debut at the Golden Hall of the Wiener Musikverein. That is extraordinary.
Yes, that was a very unique day, of course, for me. I was still a child. I mean, I remember it as a challenge, as a rather playful and let's say childish challenge to go on stage of this wonderful hall and to play also with an orchestra. It was a Mozart piano concerto that I played. As a child or young teenager, you don't feel this amount of stress, or you don't feel the weight and the importance of what you're doing. It's still a game, actually. So I have very positive memories of that.
Right. Did you know at this very early age already that you wanted to dedicate your life to music? Or was there a time when the young Ґоттліб Валліш said, I want to become a researcher, an explorer, an astronaut?
There were times, of course. I mean, I had different fields of interest also. For a long time, my dream was to become an airline pilot, actually.
All right.
But then I decided to stay with the piano because, with music in general, because I think I dedicated from a very early stage, very early time of my life, I dedicated myself to the music, and I think I learned a lot, I practiced a lot, I studied a lot in this field, and there was a certain moment when I thought it would be too disappointing, actually. It would be a pity to throw this away and to start an entire new career in a different field.
All right.
So that means I became a pianist. I'm a professor for piano also in Berlin at the university, but I still have a big passion for everything that's connected with airplanes and with aviation and with airports, etc., etc.
Right. I guess it was supposed to be. I mean, a few years have passed since your childhood.
Yes.
You have not only you have grown into an international and highly acclaimed artist. You have worked together and played together with a world-leading orchestra orchestras like the Vienna Philharmonic. You have cooperated with conductors like Giuseppe Sinopoli, Christopher Hawkwood, Neville Mariner, Kirill Petrenko, just to name a few. what really strikes me is your versatility. You know, just by looking at the orchestras you have played with and also the conductors you have worked with, I can see instantly that you are a very versatile musician. Is this versatility a precondition for an international career like yours? Or is this the Ґоттліб Валліш who just has so many musical interests and passions?
I think it's first of all mirroring my personality and many fields of interest that I have. If you look at different kinds of careers that musicians make, you find those artists who specialize a lot and play only a certain very distinct and very narrow repertoire and become very famous and great experts in that field. But on the other hand, you see, for example, if you look at Sviatoslav Richter, you cannot really just who couldn't focus him on one composer or two composers. He had also a very vast repertoire, and I think he played almost every style and every composer. He played excellently.
Yeah.
But in my case, it's I think that's also one point that helped me manage my career and also to pursue interest and not to lose interest in what I'm doing, actually, is to explore new repertoire, to explore also possibilities to play with new musical partners, to play with very different kinds of conductors and orchestras, and to play also a lot of chamber music, also to conduct singers. This is something I enjoy from time to time very much.
Right.
And yes, it's very much me, yes.
And it never certainly never gets boring, given the fact that music is such a universe, actually, with unlimited possibilities, right?
Yeah.
We'll talk about this. I mean, the universe that you actually inhabit a little bit later. I would say it's safe to say that one of your musical passions or interests is the music of Ludwig van Beethoven.
Yeah.
You just right in time on the occasion of the 250th birthday of Ludwig van Beethoven, you have released a new recording of the piano concertos of Ludwig van Beethoven, a very, very interesting and exciting project. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I can first of all show you the cover.
Wonderful, yes.
It has a beautiful silhouette of Beethoven on the front. It's a recording that I think is different in many ways to other recordings of complete piano concertos by Beethoven. First of all, it is part of the project called Resound Beethoven. That's a project that was started and invented by Austrian conductor Martin Haselberg, who had the idea to present Beethoven symphonies at the locations of their actual premieres or performances during Beethoven's lifetime. So he went to find the places in Vienna that Beethoven used for his own performances where he conducted the symphonies. For example, the Palais Lobkowitz, for example, the ceremony hall of the Academy of Sciences in Vienna, or the Niederösterreichische Landhaussaal. So several wonderful places in Vienna that are still there and can be used as historic concert venues. In addition to the symphonies, Martin Haselberg started then also to invite soloists to perform the violin concerto and also the piano concertos. And I was very lucky that in the end of this series, we recorded 3 CDs with 6 piano concertos. I can explain why there are 6 piano concertos, because we know
exactly. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the 6th piano concerto is Beethoven's own arrangement of his violin concerto for piano and orchestra. That is a very unusual thing that a composer transcribes or arranges a violin piece for keyboard. But in that case, it was his publisher in London, who was Muzio Clementi in 1807, 1808, who very much encouraged him to write this arrangement, because Clementi was very eager to publish Beethoven's music in England for the British market. So I think there was actually an economic idea behind this.
Yes. And Beethoven at this point was already a star, an international star.
Yes, he was a star, and he was also planning to travel to Great Britain, as did Joseph Haydn before. And he had plans, and he was in touch with concert organizers in Great Britain, because yes, he was very famous. And the sad thing is that these travels never materialized, never turned out. He always stayed in Vienna or in the surroundings of Vienna, but he never left Austria, actually.
All right, good for us.
Yes, I think we met Goethe in Marienbad, but that was the furthest trip I could.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, I mean, this is really a special project. Going back to the original venues, playing the old instruments, and we'll talk about the fortepianos in a second. Did this project come with particular challenges for you, also musical challenges maybe? And on the other hand, did it give you musical revelations, aspects about music of Beethoven that you were not aware of? Did you develop a deeper understanding of the music of Beethoven?
I think I managed to develop, first of all, a deeper understanding of the concert atmosphere and the situation of a concert good 200 years ago. Because if you look, for instance, at the hall like the marble concert hall of Palais Lobkowitz, which is really from the floor up to the ceiling, only out of marble, and it seats maybe 80 people. And we know that at this time people didn't sit actually at those concerts, but were standing. So in a rather small room, you had maybe 200 people standing in front of that orchestra, watching and listening an orchestra. So the room was packed. And the experience of music in such a small room with extremely strong reverberation coming from the walls, from the marble walls, that must have been an extremely intense, very direct experience of music. That was one thing that was very astonishing for me. Also, the size of the orchestra. If you again look at this small hall, and we know today that the fourth piano concerto was performed there, and the fourth symphony was also performed there. He was not able to have an orchestra larger than 30 players, including the wind instruments.
Right.
So had maybe 4 or 5 first violins, but within this small room, they created so much volume and so much sound.
And it makes sense. I mean, it's hard to believe, because we're all raised basically in a romantic tradition, right? With big stages, big orchestras, and then all of a sudden you see like an orchestra that is half the size, maximum, right? But once you listen to it, and we'll do this in a minute, you understand that it is perfectly balanced and it makes perfect sense. And of course, that's why probably it was so important to go back to the original venues, because Beethoven certainly had these venues in mind. He knew where he would perform on this occasion, right?
He knew it perfectly, and it also makes sense if you perform then on the piano part, the solo part on a historic fortepiano from 1800 or 1820, an instrument that is 2 meters or 2 meters 30 long only, which had a smaller range of keys, only 6 octaves, compared to the 7.5 octaves that we have on a modern piano today, with a very light sound in the trebles and wonderfully sonorous and powerful basses. But the mixture with the smaller orchestra makes really perfect sense.
Right.
And everything is wonderfully transparent, and you can approach these concertos more like chamber music, and really have direct contact to the wind players, and also important to the timpani player also, for instance.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the time of Beethoven in musical terms, of course. And I'm referring to the period, roughly speaking, between 1790 and 1830. It's a period of 40 years that I find music-wise very, very exciting, very interesting, because there there was so much change happening. And on the one hand, we had, of course, the evolution of style away from the Vienna classic to the Romantic period. But, and this is, of course, where you are the expert, the change in the construction of musical instruments, the progress, the new inventions that were made, and nowhere this was stronger than with pianos, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yes, the difference between a piano of Mozart's last years, a Walter piano, let's say from 1780, 1785, and difference to an instrument from 1850 and 1820, or 1825 that I used on the Beethoven recording now is stunning. The range of the keyboard became bigger. The sound has changed. If you listen to a Walter piano, you hear very much, or a Schanz piano, you still hear the idea of the harpsichord sound. If you listen to the Graf fortepiano that I used, for instance, for Concerto No. 5, you have almost a very romantic sound idea, and it looks really into the future, and you hear the sound and the possibilities of 1840 pieces by Chopin and Schumann already.
Right. I think this may be a good moment to listen to some music. What we have prepared for you is the third movement of Beethoven's Piano Concerto No. 6, Opus 61A. Maybe Ґоттліб Валліш, you can tell us a few words about this concert.
I think that what I said before, the listener is going to be very surprised, because we are so adapted and so used to hear this piece with violin and orchestra. I mean, it's Beethoven's only violin concerto. It's maybe one of the greatest and most important concertos ever written. But the piano version also, I think, is justified, especially in that third movement, because the theme is very witty and very rhythmical, and you hear that characteristic rhythm of 6/8 coming out very well also from the fortepiano. Maybe in the second movement that we're not going to hear now, the listener will miss a little bit the cantabile and the dolce of the violin, of course. But in the third violin, for me, this piano version makes a lot of sense, and it's a great one to play.
Right. Yeah, and of course, the venue where you perform is also very, very special.
Yes.
It's extremely beautiful.
Yes, the venue is one of the most magnificent halls in central Vienna. It is the Festsaal, it's the ceremony hall of the Academy of Sciences. It's the hall also where Joseph Haydn listened to I think the second performance of his oratorio, The Creation, in 1791 or 92. And yes, we know that Beethoven also gave concerts in that hall.
Right. Okay, let's have a look. Wonderful, wonderful. I love the sound. I love the sound of the fortepiano. Of course, it's so warm and at the same time so transparent. And of course, the balance between the orchestra, the different groups of instruments of the orchestra and the piano is perfect. It's just like
yes, it comes somehow very naturally together. And
yes,
it's always warm, and due to the construction of the instrument, of course, there's almost no metal used. There's no steel used like today, and so that explains the much more mellow and the sound with much more overtones also.
Yes,
That makes it so characteristic. And
yes. I mean, this is something. This is also, for the musical ear. There was a time when we got used to the violins. All of a sudden, the violin sounds new, and then different instruments like also the horn and the trumpets and stuff like that. And now we hear the piano also overtone rich, very warm. Beautiful, just beautiful, beautiful. I must say, it's my first opportunity to listen to this as well, and I'm very impressed. This is such an incredible sound. I wanted to ask you: when you play this concert or any other concert on a historical instrument, is this more challenging technique-wise, or is it the same if you play this on a modern Steinway or Bösendorfer or like an old Graf?
There is of course a significant difference between the actions of a modern instrument and a historic instrument. So the keys are on the old instrument are more narrow, and you cannot press them down so far as in the modern instrument. So modern instrument the key goes down 11 millimeters, let's say, and on a historic instrument maybe 6 millimeters. So the feeling that you have during a performance is much more flat.
Right.
And you're supposed to play much less with your whole body, but much more from the fingertips. So in a way, it refines your piano playing also on the modern instrument.
Right.
If you practice and perform on an old piano, because the way you discover what your fingertips can really do, and the sensitivity also between the skin of the fingertips and the old material, the surface of the old keys. Nowadays we have plastic keys only, which are very fine and which feel also okay, but on these old pianos, the keys were made out of bones. It's not even ivory at the time, but at that time actually bones. That explains why it has this rather yellowish color. but it's a natural product, and so your skin touches all this wood or this piece of bone, and
Right.
has a different haptic, a different feeling.
Yes.
Also, yes.
You need to learn. I suppose you need to learn to be very subtle, because in order to produce the same effects,
Yes.
with a modern piano, is more generous if you want. With an old instrument, you have to be very, very exact to produce similar effects.
Connected with this, also, what you have to learn with the old instrument is that your perception of the sound, where you sit in front of that instrument at the keyboard, is completely different to what the audience actually outside in the hall, listens. So the sound projects much more out of the old instrument, and what you yourself hear from what you play seems very small at times. Actually, it seems very soft.
Mm-hmm.
If you compare and listen to somebody else performing in the hall, you see that the sound really projects from the lid and grows in a way.
Right.
Yes. Whereas on a modern instrument, you have the more or less same impression of brilliance and volume, either in the hall, the audience, or also for yourself as a performer.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yes, so that can be very irritating at the beginning, because
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I'm too soft all the time. Nobody will hear me.
Yeah.
You must,
Until you listen to your own recordings, right? And you say, okay, I did something right.
yes.
I wanted to ask you, you're a man, of many interests, but you're also a man of many activities. And one of your activities, you mentioned it earlier, is you hold a professorship at the UDK, Universität der Künste in Berlin. You teach piano.
Yeah.
How important is that for you to pass on your knowledge to a next generation of pianists?
It is very important. I started teaching on a professional level 10 years ago. I've been teaching for 6 years at the École de Musique in Genève, at the Geneva University of Music, and then 4 years ago was appointed here in Berlin. And it is very important for me to pass on and also to exchange with my students, and to understand also what the next generation is looking for in classical music, and also to find ways and to discuss possibilities for them how to create their own ways and their own musical lives, because we know that not everyone who studies music is going to become a concert soloist or an orchestra musician. So there must be, I think, new ways and new possibilities, new fields also that young people are going to discover or are going to create for the future. That's an aspect, honestly, that became stronger even in my thoughts and in our discussions, of course, through the COVID-19 crisis.
Yeah.
The first thing that was stopped were the classical concerts, and they're also the last thing that are going to be reopened and that are going to work in a normal, usual way. So it is an existential problem for many musicians. Anyway, of course, yes.
Yeah. No, most certainly, the situation of many artists in general has been very, very difficult, and we can only hope that the situation will improve and that we'll see some sort of normalcy re-established. I think we all need that. It's not only the artists. We too need this culture and music. For our souls, we all need that, and we all miss that. Yeah. A conversation like this would not be complete without asking you, what are you working on right now? What are your projects? I would suppose that you have found maybe some more time, at home doing maybe research or rehearsing certain things. But are there any projects in the pipeline?
Yes, there are always several projects actually in the pipeline. One is a project about music from the 1920s and 1930s, that was influenced by the jazz wave that came to Europe from the United States. And the project is called 20th Century Foxtrots. And I started recording last year. It's a recording project that will go over several phases. And the first CD was about composers from that time from Austria and the Czech Republic. And the second CD will be released this year and deals only with German composers. I'm very fascinated by the amount of fantastic music in that lighter genre, let's say, that was written by classical, so-called classical composers at the time. So if you look at well-known composers like Krenek, of course, and Kurt Weill and Paul Hindemith and Erwin Schulhoff, Jaromir Weinberger, etc. And those are very famous names. But if you go into deeper research, and for instance, I visited the archives here of Akademie der Wissenschaften, Akademie der Künste here in Berlin, where you find wonderful scores of, let's say, a little more local composers here in Germany. And they wrote foxtrots and tangos and shimmies and blues at that time. You see how important that jazz wave was at the time and how many composers it has affected.
Yeah.
And so my aim is to revive these compositions, also to discover forgotten names of those composers, to introduce the audience a little bit to this enormous variety.
Well, and you deliver it. If it had been necessary, it was not. But if it had been necessary, you just delivered or provided the evidence how versatile you are as a musician, right? Switching from historical Beethoven with original instruments to foxtrot of the 20th century. That's really, really interesting. My last question for you is, of course, very interesting for the local audience here in Ukraine. When will you play in Ukraine?
I'm looking forward to coming to Ukraine, and that will be in December. So on the 9th of December this year, I'm going to play at the Philharmonie in Dnipro. And it is going to be, since it will be just a few days away of Beethoven's birthday, which was on the 16th or 17th December, one is not quite sure. So it will be an all Beethoven program, performed solo on the modern piano. And it will have a very nice, interesting, wide range of pieces with 2 piano sonatas and with bagatelles, and also the B major fantasy, a very curious piece from the middle part of his life. So there will be a nice arche, a nice bow over this program.
Potpourri, yeah.
A little bit of potpourri, yes.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, as I said earlier, we are going to listen or to watch to some more music. You are going to play for us the Beethoven Fantasy Opus 77.
Yes.
This time on a modern Steinway. Before we start with this music, I would like to say thank you very much for being our guest today. That was so interesting. I could talk with you for hours. There's so many interesting questions, and I really hope that we will find the opportunity to do that in real life when you come to Ukraine. We are very much looking forward to seeing you here in Ukraine with the music of Beethoven. I want to wish everybody a nice evening. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time at the KulturCafé. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.